About 530 million years ago, in the Cambrian explosion, scores of exotic life forms, crawling, swimming, and biting, just suddenly appeared, but were then suddenly wiped out. The next thing you know, the chain of life developed from fish to reptiles to monkeys, and from monkeys to hominids. Scores of a species of hominids have now been identified, and these spread from Africa to all the world across land bridges that are now underwater.
And now, The Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Hello, this is Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and human rights author of 325 editions in 40 languages in 190 countries worldwide, including IBM and the Holocaust, War Against the Weak, and my latest scoop book, Israel Strikes Iran, as well as a bold new 15th anniversary edition of my bestseller, Nazi Nexus. Ours is a show for opinion makers and decision makers, not mass clicks. So subscribe for alerts at theedwinblackshow.com. And if you want to support our work, we need your assistance. Please visit theedwinblackshow.com/support. Your help, big or small, assures our complete and utter intellectual and uncensored journalistic independence. Go to theedwinblackshow.com/support and keep us independent. Today's episode is made possible and sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by members of the Jewish community of San Francisco and my bold new 15th anniversary edition of Nazi Nexus, available everywhere across the planet in 12 paperback, hardback, electronic, and audiobook editions. That said, remember, I only speak for myself, and the same goes for any of my guests. Today, we welcome viewers from across America, including our 4 watch parties in the villages, Newton, Mass., Chicago, the folks in Tampa Bay. Overseas, I see viewers logged on from most of our usuals, Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain, Canada, Germany, France, Poland, Romania, Hungary, of course, Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, Japan, and our big one in Panama, as well as Israel, plus other countries. The Edwin Black Show, along with our YouTube site, speaks frankly and without tremor to a fragmented world seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our present very, very tense, and a turbulent future still uncertain. By the way, stay tuned for my special word of wisdom at the very end of the show, just before I sign off. We'll get to our mind-blowing main topic in a few minutes after these burning items. Item 1, please write down these names from Hollywood: Mark Ruffalo, Susan Sarandon, Javier Bardem, Benedict Cumberbatch, and Brian Cox. Just a few of the 200 celebrities who signed a public petition demanding the release of convicted terrorist Marwan Barghouti, now serving a life sentence for crimes including mass murdering 5 innocent civilians. They have also called for boycotting the vibrant Israel film industry. If you watch any of their movies, you are just ratifying their shocking anti-Semitism. Please have some dignity. Write the names: Mark Ruffalo, Susan Sarandon, Javier Bardem, Benedict Cumberbatch, and Brian Cox. Too bad they didn't speak out when kibbutz peaceniks were raped, killed, and burned on October 7th. Item 2, the second Holocaust is now underway. Unfortunately, I can't seem to find any experts who will disagree that this second Holocaust is now actually taking place. My friends painfully recall that going back to the last decade, I predicted this, exactly as it is now unfolding. Remember, there are 6 phases to the Holocaust: identification, exclusion, pauperization, ghettoization, deportation, and then extermination. In Nazi Germany, that was a 12-year process. Here we are now in the initial identification, exclusion, and pauperization phases. Remember, please, that this is a worldwide process, and we in the United States have our hands full right here in America as we fight the now hijacked Democratic Party, which has exploded into an anti-Jewish and anti-Israel operation. This new anti-Jewish party, the Democratic Party, forever transformed, is actually a satellite now of the Democratic Socialists of America and its extremist allies, which seeks the destruction of Israel and Jewish identity as part of a wider global movement to destroy all Western democracies and institutions. I quote from the DSA webpage, quote, "As democratic socialists, we believe we must also be internationalists. We believe that DSA is and must always be an internationalist organization." The extraordinary intersection of the Democratic Party, the Democratic Socialists, the Muslim Brotherhood, Qatar's billions, and the radical Islamists of ISIS has proved that this second Holocaust is now underway. We look, of course, to Australia, where the latest act of senseless violence has taken the lives of 15 beautiful people, wounded scores more, and permanently scarred thousands with the emotional turmoil of a terrorist attack. The blame for this monstrous terrorist attack is almost universally and correctly placed on the head of the now permanently tarnished Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, who among other world leaders recognized the Palestinian state as a reward for their October 7th violence against Jews. This country-changing Australian mass murder follows the permissive chanting of "Gas to Jews" in front of the Sydney Opera House and the greenlighting of calls for mass murder with the slogan "Globalize the Intifada." Australians are now so angry and so mobilized, 50,000 showed up to give blood, and everywhere Prime Minister Albanese has been declared unwelcome and at fault. He wasn't even able to attend the funerals. Remember, just weeks before in October, on the high holy day Yom Kippur, a Manchester, England synagogue was attacked. 3 people died. Canadian Jews are in fear and considering emigration as fast as they can figure out where. In New York, a day or two, we see Jews violently attacked on the subway, stabbed on the street. So this is the well-documented pattern we saw in Nazi Germany and elsewhere in anti-Semitic Europe during the first years of the 12-year Holocaust that played out on the streets of Europe and even the United States, and indeed was broadcast across the pages of the world's great newspapers. The pot is boiling, going up 1 degree at a time, violent act after violent act, oppressive trauma after oppressive trauma, until we crack. Each family will crack in its own time, they assume. So what do? We cannot stop this Holocaust because we are being swarmed with incidents every day, everywhere. It's happening. But we can mitigate it, constrain it, and limit it. That means it's time, folks. Time to check your local laws and get your local permits. Get your mandatory training and get ready to protect yourself and others. Also, check for commercially available handheld products you can purchase at Walmart, Amazon, and Home Depot. This means non-lethal pepper spray gel. Get the gel, not the pure spray. This is the same stuff that many women carry in their hand when they walk to their cars in a parking lot. My daughter had it in her purse years ago when we sent her off to school. You'll be able to protect yourself and others. In other words, we are in the same position now, today, as my parents and grandparents. This includes all you religious Jews who are being targeted now but don't have the sense to protect yourself. And let me say a word to the Golden Calf Jews who voted so forcefully for Mamdani and who devote so much energy to destroying the Jewish community. You're all going to have your bridge over the River Kwai moment. One day, you will look up in astonishment and declare, "What have I done?" Not only to myself, to my people, and to all mankind. And now, we tackle the biggest questions in all of existence. Who are we, and what is our place in the universe? I promise you, no real answers, but instead a kaleidoscope of additional questions, a cascade of intellectual and scientific astonishment, and a headache from the monumental concepts about to unfold. I'm going to divide my remarks into 4 columns. First, our universe and our place in it. Second, our planet and its place. Third, our humanity as sentient human beings. And fourth, the unanswerable question of existence itself. Before I start, know this. The smartest scientists on the planet don't know the answers and barely know the questions. They have theories, guesses, and empty gaps where the very edifice of knowledge comes to an abrupt halt. What's more, scientific knowledge has become like shifting sand dunes. I think it is safe to say the more we learn, the more we realize how little we know. But confronting these prodigious questions can help us confront the little things that now make up and control our lives and which do not even register on the Richter scale of reality. Start with the universe. Every standard science book and authority you consult since the 1920s will tell you the universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old, the so-called Big Bang. Nobody knows what banged and what caused the bang, but we are told the process began with an immeasurably dense, immeasurably hot, immeasurably small, and immeasurably potent accretion of almighty nothingness, which suddenly exploded in an unbelievably violent event, which in its first fractions of a time unit called a zeptosecond, get that right, a zeptosecond, that is 1/trillionth of a billionth of a second, this super dense, whatever it was, began to inflate. Scientists actually call this process inflation. Anyway, during these initial zeptoseconds, our tiny universe was so dense, neither matter, light, nor energy could escape. Within the first 3 minutes, reminding you that we have no idea what minutes mean in the cosmic process, the first protons, electrons, and then 2 substances emerged. It was 70% hydrogen and 25% helium. Light itself could now form and escape. 2 theoretical, never seen, and never identified forces called dark matter and dark energy then emerged to push things out and pull things in. That created a universe composed of this mysterious dark energy, about 68% they say, forcing the universe to expand faster than the speed of light, and dark matter, about 27%, providing extra gravitational restraint, and then only about 5% normal matter. That is the stars, the planets, and everything else, including your own body. In the process, the universe created limitless numbers of stars that formed hundreds of billions of galaxies, all moving away from each other faster than the speed of light, and still moving away from each other faster than the speed of light. The result? 1 trillion galaxies containing more than 1 septillion individual stars. Revolving around those stars, scientists guess, are more than 700 quintillion planets and uncountable moons. And that's just the estimated 25% of the universe we can see. 75% we will never see, never measure, and never know. So this is like standing on your porch, unable to see over the horizon that's about 8 miles down, and feeling confident enough to know what the Earth is made of. But here's the kicker. The leading astrophysicists and cosmologists no longer believe this 13.8 billion year saga. As a result of the James Webb Telescope, we have now discovered so many well-developed galaxies at the very edge of time in the young universe where they should not be, that the scientific community now believes the universe is twice as old as we thought it was last year. It's at least 27 billion years old, and they also believe that dark matter, if it does exist, may not even be relevant. Wait, so no one knows, but they know this much. What we thought we knew and what you currently believe is not true. Hence, if we ask whether or not we are alone, we have to consider that there are octillions upon octillions of planets plus moons with a chance for particles to come together and create life. Now to our own home planet Earth. One of these countless galaxies formed was the Milky Way, with about 200 billion solar systems in it. And 4.5 billion years ago, our particular sun and its solar system of planets formed. Earth solidified to become a real planet. First it was mainly fire, and then it was mainly ice, and then it became rich in waters and lands, and we will never leave our solar system. The nearest habitable planet is Proxima Centauri b, which orbits the star Proxima Centauri. That's the closest star, just over 4 light years away. It would take anywhere from 100 years to 70,000 years to get there, depending upon the science fiction propulsions you visualize. This is why our universe is so potentially teeming with life, but we can't see anyone. The distances are literally astronomical and cast off too far away for any life to find us. Perhaps in the not too distant future, for multi-generational mechanical missions, there will be some discovery, but we can safely table that discussion for another generation. In other words, call me in 25 years. That brings us to our Earth. 71% of the surface is covered in water, but no one really knows how water came to Earth. They theorize it was a bunch of comets and some watery parts of our molten core. But at almost 1.4 billion kilometers of water, that will require more billions of comets with water than anyone can comprehend. The truth is, science just doesn't know. This brings me to our planet's geology. Everyone knows that the land is layer after layer built up and visible in strata, or a geological cross-section that we can see that tells the story of our physical geological upheaval. But 25% of this geologic record has disappeared worldwide. This means that the record from 100 million years ago to over 1.2 billion years ago has just disappeared. Repeat, disappeared, including the fossil record. This is like your attic sitting on top of your foundation. Scientists call this global missing link the Great Unconformity. A few weird theories exist, but no one can come close to guessing why 25% of the Earth's record just vanished. Now let's get to life itself. We are told that the Earth formed 4.5 billion years ago, and that after a billion or so years, a bunch of rocks underwent some exposure to sunlight in such a way that a miraculous chemical transformation occurred, creating cyanobacteria, eukaryotes, and prokaryotes, and other forms of early life, single-celled. For life to exist, it must have a permeable outer membrane separating it from the outside environment, with the ability to take and excrete anything in and out, and finally reproduce itself. We are told from that these sun-drenched rocks arose all biology, from jellyfish to politicians, often considered, by the way, a related life form. About 530 million years ago, in the Cambrian explosion, scores of exotic life forms, crawling, swimming, and biting, just suddenly appeared, but were then suddenly wiped out. The next thing you know, the chain of life developed from fish to reptiles to monkeys, and from monkeys to hominids. Scores of a species of hominids have now been identified, and these spread from Africa to all the world across land bridges that are now underwater. Thanks to climate change, the monkeys had to climb down and become land creatures. 400,000 years ago, they evolved into the cavemen we have heard about, meaning Neanderthal. Neanderthal had to have legs and knees that supported upright movement, had to have a voice box for language, ears for enhanced audition, and they enjoyed a very large working brain, about 1,640 centimeters. Plus, they had to somehow choose mating partners just like themselves for reproduction. Originally, we were told these cavemen were just a bunch of bruisers who died out and were replaced by the better version, and that was Homo sapien. Homo sapien had smaller brains, from 1,300 to 1,500 centimeters, but we were told they were better brains, smaller but better. So Homo sapiens thrived and became you and me, but now we know that is not true. Neanderthal clans were complex groups with group thinking, with abstract, symbolic, and artistic actions. More than that, they coexisted with Homo sapien in combined communities, especially in one cave in Israel called Taboon. It's located just south of Haifa. Most people today, that is me and you, still reflect 1 to 2% Neanderthal in our DNA. Most interesting is that Neanderthal survived the Ice Age, and at one point it is theorized just a few hundred persons, or perhaps up to 1,500 persons, managed to survive the impossibly brutal Ice Age climate about 900,000 years ago. Scientists call this the genetic bottleneck. All societies descend from these few small bands of humanity that huddled together and survived the last Ice Age. About 13,000 years ago, as the Ice Age retreated and the planet warmed, we saw cultures and populations expand and flourish. The last part of my explication involves the question of existence. And this part is going to bend your brain. First, when we talk about time, it is a highly debatable construct. Einstein taught us that there is no such thing as true time except as it functions in space, that is, space-time. Everything we see has already happened. The stars we see were emanations that occurred billions of years ago, and due to the speed of light, are only reaching us now. We can judge this from the redshift, that is the elongation of the light waves over millions of years, so only the red component is visible. We know what an echo is. It is the sound that happened before, but is just reaching us, and there the speed of sound is relevant. Even now, as you see my image live, it actually happened not now, but just before. Hence, there is no now. I'll repeat that. There is no now. Moreover, space itself can be bent by gravity or pressure and even speed, and that impacts when you actually see something. But most mind-blowing is that everything we have discussed is subject to our consciousness. In other words, existence exists because we or someone perceives it. Einstein asked, if a tree falls in the woods and no one knew it or saw it, did it actually fall? And this leads to the understanding that will really hurt your head the most. The majority of the great minds among theoretical physicists, cosmologists, and other particle physics gurus believe that our entire dimension, our universe, everything that is, resides in just one of 11 dimensions. It is possible, the best scientists believe, that our dimensions exist alongside 10 other dimensions, perhaps more, where everything occurs in endless permutation. That is, I am theoretically in my basement on Zoom, but I could be on a mountaintop staring at a rock in one dimension and shouting from a rooftop in another. They, I mean the best scientists, believe that our universe was created as part of an endless chain of universes, and everything in existence is replicated and distorted in endless variations. They theorize this is a multiverse, not a universe. And this multiverse is governed by a set of principles set forth in what is known as string theory, whereas the next version of me and you is just immeasurably right next door in another dimension, governed by the harmonics and the vibration of subatomic strings. There's a point here. Not only do we have no idea who we are, where we are, or how the heck we got here, the truly scientific mind must conclude that a prime mover is at play. So you can call it intelligent design, you can call it God, you can use the term the creator. I'm a skeptical scientific man, but like Isaac Newton, Moses before me, I believe in a superior being, perhaps active, perhaps gone forever, that touched the elements and created who we are and how we are. This creator may be gone forever, or maybe he's just waiting upstairs and ready to come back. But I believe in something bigger than ourselves in our existence that impacted our existence. We're not just a bunch of rocks that got hit by sunlight and out came a best-selling author. Normally, I'd like to say I left out 99% of what I could have said, but in this case, I feel justified in saying I left out a universe of information, perhaps a multiverse. With that, I shift the burden to my colleague, Faye Lincoln, author of the ethics bestseller, Values That Shape the World, a person who, like me, has pondered and focused on the nature of life and what living things have done with it. I shift the burden to you, Faye. If you think you have the intellectual focus in the dimension we are currently sharing at this moment in space-time, then please take the camera before it dissolves into another filament of string. And remember, I dealt with the big stuff, so maybe you can deal with the really, really little things. Go, Faye.
Thank you, Edwin. That was fascinating. So I, too, have been fascinated by all of this, but mainly from an evolutionary standpoint, from the standpoint of the emergence of life and DNA. So let us ask the question, who are we? Let me ponder my first question. How does evolution occur in humans? Evolutionary theory would have us think that only random mutations cause change based on natural selection, survival of the fittest. However, it's well known that most random mutations in our genes cause death, not better evolutionary outcomes. The more I think about it, our DNA is just too complex to chalk up evolution to a random set of mutations that occurred over the millennia. So let's take a step back in time to explore this further. There was a clear evolutionary transition between 70,000 and 50,000 years ago on Earth when we moved away from being ancient Homo sapiens to the more modern version of humans that could walk and run over long distances and better adapt to our environments. 20,000 years is actually a very short period of time for this transition to occur. But think about this. Evolutionists would have us believe that random mutations suddenly allowed us to walk and run on two legs, produce fire, make simple tools, speak languages, and think through problems. The frontal lobes of our brain grew larger for rational thinking and problem solving, while our skeleton realigned to support our bodies. Well, common sense would tell us that not 1, 2, or even 10 genes had to change to accommodate so many major leaps. In fact, many genes would have had to change. Random mutations cannot accomplish this feat, at least in my mind. The probability that the right random genes could be created is almost statistically impossible. Over time, changes in our environment and surroundings, such as major temperature changes, landscape shifts, and migration, may have put some type of stress on our genes to adapt and allow us to change in positive ways and thereby emerge as modern humans. Evolving our gene structure so that we could walk and run over long distances and think rationally, as well as work together cooperatively, became an advantage. I wonder if the key might reside in what we call junk DNA. The common belief is that only 2% of our genes appear to function in our cells, and approximately 98% of it is what we call junk DNA, the dark matter of our genes that appears to have no use. But actually, junk DNA provides the structure for how much DNA is exposed in our cells and therefore read in our cells. Maybe changes in our environment put pressure on our DNA to change its shape over time, thereby exposing a little bit more of our junk DNA, like taking a ball of yarn and slowly loosening it, which makes it larger and uncovers more genes to be read in all of our cells and provides us with some new capabilities in our bodies and our brain. These changes may be small and occur slowly, but over time they add up. Environmental change creating rapid transitions in our human capabilities. I call this change punctuated equilibrium. The shift occurs quickly over a short period of time, relatively speaking, then slows down again over a long evolutionary span. Is this what might have happened 70 to 50,000 years ago? Our genes could, in the future, make us healthier, live longer, and reduce chronic conditions. We could possibly even heal ourselves. They could make some of us more intuitive and knowing with shifts in our magnetic field around us, while others become more creative using rational science and technology in the digital age. In the short run, the phenomenon of punctuated equilibrium could be the result of rapid evolutionary change on humans over time. External forces could put positive adaptive pressure on our gene structures to generate evolved capabilities. Which leads me to a second question for us to ponder: the role of consciousness in evolution. What comes first, thought or action? If you think about moving your foot, thought comes first, then action. So where does thought come from? Certainly, I don't think from the tangle of neurons in our brain. Something has to start that chemical reaction so that we could move our foot. What if consciousness is a primary property of our universe? What if our brains function not only at the chemical and physical level, but also at the quantum level? The invisible quantum world makes up most of space. What if consciousness is a part of this and we connect with it? I'm not sure that our brain becomes more conscious as it enlarges, as some would say. Instead, maybe the brain enables consciousness to emerge through its complex clusters of neurons and electrical activity, which can pick up our thoughts and memories from the quantum world. Maybe it's our soul, along with memory waves surrounding us, that creates consciousness as thought connected to the world around us. To tie all this together, maybe our purpose is to evolve consciously, to become better human beings, to create purpose and meaning in the world. By doing so, our consciousness impacts others, both directly and indirectly through the physical and quantum world, in ways that connect us to each other and encourages us to evolve toward a higher evolutionary level. The quantum world of the universe may be the primary source of consciousness and the heart of evolution as we know it.
Wow, Faye, I tackled the big thing, but I see you're tackling the little thing.
Yeah.
So,
quantum world is a world of little things, actually.
All right, because I can just visualize Ken, his head is bursting. Just tell us a little bit about quantum entanglement.
Well, quantum entanglement essentially means that if you have very, very small atomic particles, like electrons, for example, that have somehow in some way come into contact with each other, and then they're spread out, the distance can be as far as you can possibly think, that when you spin one electron, the other one will spin exactly the same, okay, or in the reverse direction. They're entangled, in other words. That's called non-locality. And that's one of the things that Einstein actually had a very hard time with, trying to understand, is that particles that have come into contact with each other at some point are basically on the same frequency or wavelength. And so that creates this field of non-locality or entanglement. So if you and I interact all the time, Edwin, which we often do, then you may know what I think and I may know what you think because we may be entangled. Our minds may be entangled, and we anticipate things. Now, think of something else that's kind of interesting. There have been studies shown where you have an island, okay, in the ocean, and you have another island, maybe, within a distance, but there's no way that animals could have gotten from one to the other. And you put monkeys on one island, okay, and they suddenly have a new trait of some sort, okay, or they pick up a new habit. And so one or two monkeys start to do that. And then suddenly all the monkeys on the island over a short period of time start to pick up the same practice. Well, interestingly, what they've shown is that monkeys on the other island, and by the way, the monkeys didn't have internet, okay? So there's no way for them to get over there. But suddenly monkeys on the other island start to pick up the same trait. And pretty soon, monkeys on both sides of the island are doing the same thing. Well, where does that come from? So the reality is that, when we have thoughts, memories, when we do things, when we try to do things with the appropriate, maybe purpose in life, and we affect others, well, those other people are affecting others as well. And we're going to larger and larger numbers of people. And pretty soon, more people are picking up the same habit. Are our minds entangled? Are we somehow connected through the quantum world? Are we communicating in some fashion other than just physical or the internet? Unknown, but that's part of quantum entanglement, I think. So,
well, that would explain why my wife is always finishing my sentences and why we always
right.
we always think of the same thing simultaneously.
Right.
So this concept of quantum entanglement, what you're basically saying is that two objects which have interacted and then move far, far, far away from each other are still controlled or have a relationship which governs each other. And that's what physicists call quantum entanglement, right?
Correct. Exactly.
Okay. Let's get to the questions. This is from the Villages. Are you saying you believe in God? All right. Faye, are you saying you believe in God or something like God?
Well, first of all, let me say that I do believe in God, and I do believe in a higher being, however that might be defined. Okay. Now, the question, and I think, Edwin, you brought this up also at the end of your discussion, and that is, how do you define God? Okay. Is God a form of living energy? Is God a form of connectedness? When we think of God as being omniscient and omnipresent, how do we think about that? Does God know everything that we are doing? Or is there some other type of a quantum phenomenon that's going on in that? I can't tell you exactly what God is, but I do believe that the energy of God tries to drive us toward a higher evolutionary level. When I have thought about what we, in terms of our souls as beings, what our purpose is, especially when we think about the cosmos that you've described, that's so huge. Are we just a random speck? Or are we really people who have some kind of a role in this evolutionary process? And I truly believe that we do have a purpose. That purpose is to try to achieve a higher and a good, however you want to define good, evolutionary level that will help others, and that eventually somehow interacts with the universe in some fashion. So
it's interesting.
I think that's driven by God, whatever God is.
It's interesting that you can't quite define what links us all. You can't quite define what connects us all, but science now understands that innate objects are somehow connected if they have commingled in any way. And I would say that as an investigative reporter, as a skeptical person, as a person who definitely questions first, second, and third, if you come upon a house in the middle of the desert And sure, you can figure out the 2x4s, the plaster, the bricks, the asphalt, the nails, and science has done that with our own existence. But someone has got to put all this together. And the house didn't make itself. I mean, do you actually believe that a couple of rocks got exposed to sunlight and out came authors?
It's just hard for me to fathom that. That's for sure.
Okay, let's get.
Edwin, can I mention something that you've just said? Because I think you hit on something very important in relationship to this. Not only connectivity, but, bringing different elements together to try to build something. When a lot of people talk about the laws of physics, we talk about the laws of entropy, okay? And of course, in entropy, that means that everything seems to fall apart, and come apart, and we seem to always be moving towards destruction. But when you think about life and life emerging, okay, the example that you gave in relationship to building the house, okay, is really taking many parts, and ultimately the house that you get, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, okay? And so life is like that. Life seems to be an emergence where you have many, many, many different components, obviously millions, if not billions of components, but somehow it came together so that the whole, the human being, is greater than the sum of its parts. And that's called complexity theory, okay? That requires energy to be put into the system to build something better that emerges.
I can't tell you how much we've left out, including the fact that we have multiple types of consciousness. People dream. And when they're dreaming, they're in another consciousness. Right. So what's real, the dream or what we have now? Let's get to the watch party from Newton, Massachusetts, named for, of course, our friend Newton. When was the great unconformity discovered, and is it worldwide? The great unconformity was discovered in the late 1800s by the explorer Powell, who went through the Grand Canyon, and they were able to observe the strata, and they observed that they can tell how old things are, and they observed that there was a great missing link from 100 million years to 1.5 billion years. You can't just have land that's 100 million years old and the next layer is 1.5 billion. Yes, it is worldwide. No one has even come close to giving a credible hypothesis for how this could have happened. So, Faye, what is your thought about this missing link, and what could be inside this missing link, for heaven's sakes?
To me, it sounds as if it's some sort of maybe over time, a major, and I mean major, maybe nothing that we can think of in our minds, but a major type of a geologic change and shift that impacted the earth in some fashion, that somehow took, layers of history that somehow disappeared, okay? Maybe it was asteroids, I don't know. Maybe it was major changes in magnetic shifts around the planet. As folks might know, we have magnetic fields around the planet. The magnetic fields are created by the iron core that we have in our Earth. And it's the magnetic shield that also keeps our atmosphere intact, okay? And if something were to make if there were multiple major changes that took place in the formation of the Earth or some time in the history of the Earth, and this caused some major geologic shifts, then much of that history could just disappear, essentially, as we know it.
We know that the Earth is constantly slowly being subducted, or shall I say, sucked into the core of the Earth in the Marianas Trench and other locations where the land is just moving, and it joins the core, and out comes new land through these volcanic activities. I'm just theorizing here. It's possible something like that could occur. Here's a question from Steve in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. Does remote viewing fit into quantum physics? Remote viewing, of course, we had the famous CIA caper called Operation Stargazer or Project Stargazer, and remote viewing has been successfully undertaken where they can get an object. You know, a dog can smell an object and track it. These people would get an object of some kind. They would concentrate on it and remote view until the point where they could see the building in Russia where it was taking place. I've seen schools where kids are involved in remote viewing. Remote viewing is real, and it tends to go to the quantum entanglement that Faye was discussing. So remote viewing is real. Remote viewing exists today. I've seen it in schools. There's a fabulous documentary on it, and it was an official government program. There's even a comedy movie about it. Faye, what do you know?
Yeah, Russia did lots of experiments on that way back in the earlier decades. Remote viewing, if you think about, one of the things that I sort of, believe, I think, is that if consciousness is some sort of a primary property of the universe, okay, and we're able to pick up things in the universe in some fashion through our very, very sensitive kinds of brains, depending on the wavelengths that we can pick up. And, Edwin, you mentioned the dimensions, okay? I mean, things exist in other dimensions. When I think about what's around us, we may be able to pick up those memories, the consciousness that exists in fields around us, and that becomes part of remote viewing as well. So the other thing is that I'll take it out one step further, and that is I too, as you, are fascinated by the space-time continuum. And when we think about gravity, Newton always said gravity is when the apple falls to earth. Okay, but gravity is really a combination of our iron core within the earth in connection with a whole space field around us, okay, in space, that kind of bends, okay, with mass. And the two together, depending on the size of the mass, create gravity. And within that, I consider that the space-time continuum. And so the question is there really time? Okay. If time really doesn't exist, it only exists in our world, let's say, because we are a greater mass, physical mass, and time is slower for us. But in the quantum world, time may not even exist. And so when you think about memories and remote viewing, okay, and if memories are part of the world around us and we can pick those up as something within the quantum field, then time doesn't become an issue. And so we pick up remote viewing. So there's this whole connectedness, I think, that might exist between the two.
All right. Thank you for that. The Watch Party in Chicago says, where is mankind going? Now, that's interesting because that goes to the very thrust of why I scheduled this show. And by the way, I love the trailer that I made for this show. So the reason I spoke about the unimaginable vastness of our universe was because so many people are fighting over so many small, tiny things that in the vastness of space and time, or space-time, or in the larger subset of existence, don't even register on the Richter scale. But I fear, it's interesting that Faye brought up entropy, which is constantly in destruction. The universe essentially destroyed itself and then reformed itself into all of these stars. And so I think that I wanted to give context to mankind that we are fighting about very, very small things. And if we put them into the larger context, it might make a difference. It also deals with an issue that the Jewish people treat when they talk about life and death. They always say, well, when a person dies, he lives on in memory. So if he lives on and only in memory, what is memory? It's electrical, it's chemical. We're talking about, I can see him now, but he's not there. So the point is, these are all metaphysical questions. So when I say, so where is mankind going? Mankind right now is headed on that entropy path. Mankind is fast trying to destroy itself, completely disregarding its place in humanity, in the universe, and existence. So I am very concerned more than at any time in my life that all the ingredients of our present world are tearing us apart instead of bringing us together, and we really don't know what's around the corner. Faye.
Well, let me try to be a little bit more optimistic. And let me start from where you're saying. You're absolutely correct, Edwin, in that, we have a choice as human beings, how we act. Okay. We have a choice of, and I'm using this as arbitrary, being good and being bad, making good choices and making bad choices individually and as a people and as a world. Okay. And what path we choose, I think, helps, determines what direction we'll end up going in the future. So if you believe that, or, any person believes that they are merely a random speck of dust in the cosmos, okay, and there's no life out there and there's nothing else to interact with, then one may say, what's the purpose of life? What's the purpose of living? I can do whatever I want, and that's the end of it. But if you have a worldview that says that we are all connected in some fashion, that there is more out there than just us, maybe it exists at a different dimension, I have to believe that there is more out there. And if you believe that, and you believe that we make good choices and we make decisions so that we become better people, we help other people become better, and eventually we can evolve to a higher level because of that, then we have a place in the universe. And that place is through connectedness somehow in the quantum world. And maybe one day we will meet them. That I think would be the best of all, possibilities. I happen to be of the feeling that we can make a difference. We do make a difference. There are forces behind us that help us make a difference, even when times look really bad.
So, in other words, if two dead subatomic particles can be connected, it's possible that these complex beings that we represent can also be connected. And ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. And when I say we're out of time, I mean we're out of space time. Hold for my closing word of wisdom, just 2 minutes away, whatever 2 minutes means in space time. But first, I want to thank my very knowledgeable, gracious guest, Faye Lincoln. Plus, I thank my talented international team, including Eve in New Jersey, who challenged me intellectually on everything I just said, Holly in Nashville, Martin in Michigan, and Carol in Maryland, as well as many others in numerous additional cities around the world. I'll see everyone back here in 2 weeks at 3 p.m. Eastern. You want to be a friend of the Edwin Black Show? Go to the edwinblackshow.com/support. Keep me independent. You want to hear me in person? Consult my events page at edwinblack.com. Until then, head over to any Barnes & Noble in the USA or any Amazon, Walmart, iTunes Books, Google Books, Kobo, or Audible.com platform in 190 countries across this roiling, toiling, boiling planet, where you can find any of my 325 book editions, such as IBM and the Holocaust and my latest Israel Strikes Iran. If you want an autographed copy, hit edwinblack.com and click books. Get access alerts to participate live in future shows, not knowing what the future really is. Future shows at theedwinblackshow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show and prior episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel at The Edwin Black Show, and then click the notification button like tens of thousands of others have. Follow me at Edwin Black Book on X as well as Facebook. And now for my closing word of wisdom. You are part of the universe. That means there's a universe inside you. I'm zooming out from our nation's capital. Bless all of you. Pray for all that is unfolding before our very eyes.